Some rejections don't just hurt, they brand themselves into your identity, marking you as lesser in ways that never fully heal. Imagine standing in the center of the royal presentation hall, wearing a dress you stitched yourself from discount fabric, while every noble-born Omega around you glitters in silk and jewels. The choosing ceremony has begun, where eligible alphas select their potential mates from the season's presentation class. One by one, Omegas are approached, courted, claimed. But not you. Her name is Isla Thorne, and she's 22 years old. She's watched 17 Omegas get chosen in the past hour. She's endured whispered comments about her secondhand shoes, her home-cut hair, her lack of family crest. When Lord Garrett walks past her for the third time without even making eye contact, someone in the crowd laughs outright. "Poor thing," a duchess whispers loud enough for everyone to hear. No alpha wants damaged goods. Isla's hands shake, but she keeps her chin up. She won't cry. She won't give them that satisfaction. That's when the massive oak doors slam open with a force that rattles the chandeliers. Every head turns. Every conversation dies. And the Beast King walks into the hall like vengeance personified, his silver eyes scanning the crowd until they lock onto one person. Her. Setup. The Omega who wasn't supposed to exist. 6 months before the ceremony, Isla's life was already falling apart. She grew up in the lower district of Valdris, the II, capital's poorest quarter. Her mother died in childbirth. Her father, a blacksmith's assistant, worked himself to death trying to provide for her. By 16, she was alone, surviving on seamstress work and whatever odd jobs she could find. But Isla had one thing that set her apart. She was an Omega. In a society where Omegas were rare and valued, where they were supposed to guarantee status and wealth through advantageous matches, Isla should have been protected, cherished. Instead, she was an anomaly, a poor Omega, a contradiction that made the upper classes uncomfortable. The Omega registry tracked all Omega births, and when Isla presented at 17, she was registered like everyone else. But without family connections, without a dowry, without the social graces taught in expensive academies, she became what the nobility called a charity case. The crown provided her with basic housing and a stipend, the legal minimum required for unmated Omegas. But that's where the support ended. No finishing school, no introduction to society, no alpha families inquiring about her potential. For 5 years, she lived in limbo. Too Omega to be ignored, too poor to be accepted. Then, 3 months ago, everything changed when the new Omega Protection Act passed. The law mandated that all registered Omegas of mating age be presented at the annual choosing ceremony, regardless of social status. It was meant to prevent wealthy families from hoarding Omega children and manipulating bloodlines. For Isla, it meant being thrown into a world that had already decided she didn't belong. She borrowed money she couldn't afford to pay back for the presentation dress. She watched tutorial videos on proper curtsying. She memorized the names of every major noble family, hoping that knowledge might compensate for her lack of pedigree. But the moment she walked into the presentation hall and saw the other Omegas, draped in designer gowns with professional styling and centuries of breeding behind them, she knew the truth. She was here to be a cautionary tale, a reminder of what happens when Omegas don't come from the right families. The ceremony master barely pronounced her name correctly during introductions. The alphas circled past her like she was invisible. And when Lord Garrett, a minor baron known for collecting Omega conquests, wrinkled his nose after catching her scent, the room's barely suppressed disdain became open mockery. "I heard she used to scrub floors," someone whispered. "Can you imagine? An Omega who's done manual labor. Disgusting. The registry should have standards. Not every Omega is worthy of presentation." Isla stood there, heat creeping up her neck, fighting the instinct to run. She'd promised herself she'd endure the full ceremony, that she wouldn't give them the satisfaction of watching her flee. But when the Duchess made her damaged goods comment, something inside Isla cracked. She was about to excuse herself, about to claim illness and escape with whatever dignity remained, when the doors exploded inward, and her entire world shifted. Inciting incident. The king who broke every rule. Theon Arkell, the Beast King of the Northern Territories, doesn't attend choosing ceremonies. In 300 years of immortal life, he's never participated in the archaic social rituals of Omega presentation. He's never needed to. Alphas of his power don't choose from ceremonial lineups. They command, and the world rearranges itself. But tonight he's here, and he's furious. He strides through the crowd, and people scatter like leaves before a storm. He's massive, well over 6 feet, with shoulders that seem to take up the entire doorframe. His hair is dark as midnight, pulled back from a face carved from granite and violence. Scars trace his jaw and hands, proof of battles fought before most people in this room were born. He wears no formal attire, just black combat gear and a cloak that moves like living shadow. He looks utterly out of place among the silk and champagne, and he doesn't care even slightly. His silver eyes sweep the room, dismissing alphas and omegas alike, until they land on Isla. They lock onto her with an intensity that makes her breath catch. He crosses the hall in long strides. Alphas who were ignoring Isla seconds ago now stumble over themselves to get out of his way. Theon stops directly in front of her, close enough that she has to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. His scent hits. Her pine and winter storms and something ancient that makes her omega instincts sing in a way they never have before. "Name," he says, his voice low and commanding. Isla, she manages, her heart pounding so hard she's sure everyone can hear it. Isla Thorne. His eyes narrow slightly, assessing. Then he turns to face the crowd, positioning himself slightly in front of her in a stance that's unmistakably protective. "This omega," he announces, his voice carrying through the silent hall, "belongs to me." The room erupts in chaos. Gasps. Whispers. Someone drops a champagne glass and it shatters on the marble floor. The ceremony master rushes forward, wringing his hands. "Your Majesty, I wasn't aware you planned to participate in—" "I'm not participating," Theon cuts him off coldly. "I'm claiming. There's a difference." He looks down at Isla, and his expression softens almost imperceptibly. "Unless you object." It's not really a question, but he's offering her an out. A choice. And that tiny gesture of respect in a room full of alphas who've treated her like garbage makes Isla's decision easy. "I don't object," she says, her voice stronger than she expected. Theon's mouth curves into something that's not quite a smile but carries the same warmth. "Then we're done here," he says, extending his hand. Isla takes it and he leads her toward the exit, leaving behind a hall full of shocked nobility and a social order that just got turned completely upside down. Theon's personal carriage is nothing like the ornate vehicles favored by the nobility. It's armored, practical, designed for war zones rather than social calls, but inside, it's surprisingly comfortable, lined with soft leather and thick furs. Isla sits across from him, her mind spinning. The adrenaline from the ceremony is fading, replaced by 1,000 questions and the dawning realization of what just happened. "Why?" she finally asks. Theon studies her for a long moment before answering. "You know, what I heard when I walked into that hall? Everyone's heartbeat, excitement, anticipation, smugness. But yours?" He leans forward slightly. "Yours was steady, determined. You were terrified, humiliated, and angry, but you weren't broken. You stood there with your chin up, refusing to give them the satisfaction of your tears." He pauses, his silver eyes intense. "I've lived 3 centuries, Isla. I've seen countless omegas presented like prize livestock. Most of them have been trained to perform, to smile and preen and play the games expected of them. But you're real. And that room full of pampered idiots couldn't see what was standing right in front of them." Isla's throat tightens. "You claimed me to prove a point." "No," Theon says firmly. "I claimed you because the moment I caught your scent, every instinct I have locked onto you like you were made for me. The point I proved to that room was just a bonus." The honesty in his voice makes her believe him, which is terrifying in its own way. "What happens now?" she asks quietly. "Now you come to my estate," he says. "You'll have your own quarters, completely private. I'm not going to force anything on you. Despite what that ceremony implies, claiming isn't ownership. It's a declaration of intent. What we do with that intent is up to both of us." Isla searches his face for deception but finds none. "You barely know me." "True," he acknowledges. "So we'll fix that. We'll talk. We'll spend time together. And if you decide I'm not what you want, I'll release the claim. No consequences, no social penalties. I'll make sure you're provided for, protected, and free to make your own choices." It sounds too good to be true. In Isla's experience, nothing comes without strings attached. But something in Theon's steady gaze makes her want to believe, makes her want to take the risk. "Okay," she says. "Let's try." Theon's estate is massive, but surprisingly homey. It's not a palace dripping with gold. It's a fortified manor. built for comfort and defense, filled with lived-in furniture, extensive libraries, and windows that overlook mountain ranges. He shows Isla to her quarters, a suite of rooms larger than her entire previous apartment. There's a bedroom with a fireplace, a private bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people, and a sitting room with shelves clearly waiting to be filled. "If you need anything, pull that cord," Theon says, pointing to an embroidered bell pull near the door. "Staff will respond immediately, and these are yours." He hands her a set of keys. "Your rooms lock from the inside. Your privacy is absolute." Isla takes the keys, touched by the gesture. "Thank you." He nods and turns to leave, then pauses. "Dinner is at 7. It's informal. Just us, if you want company." "I do," she says quickly, then adds more softly. "I'd like that." The smile he gives her is warm and genuine, transforming his harsh features into something beautiful. Over the next week, they fall into a routine. Dinners together, where they talk about everything and nothing. Walks through the estate gardens, where Theon tells her about the plants he's collected over centuries. Quiet evenings in the library, where they read in comfortable silence. Isla learns that Theon isn't the monster the stories paint him as. He's thoughtful, surprisingly funny, and deeply lonely in ways he rarely acknowledges. He's lived so long that he's lost most of his ability to connect with people, but with her, something shifts. He opens up. She tells him about growing up poor, about losing her father, about the years she spent invisible to everyone who mattered. He listens without judgment, without trying to fix things, just bearing witness to her story. And slowly, carefully, something real begins to grow between them. But the outside world doesn't stay away forever. 3 weeks after the claiming, the backlash begins. The Noble Assembly, a council of the kingdom's most powerful families, files a formal petition challenging the validity of Theon's claim. They argue that Isla's lack of family lineage makes her unsuitable for a mate bond with royalty. They cite ancient laws about bloodline purity and Omega quality standards. It's thinly veiled classism wrapped in legal language, but it's effective. The petition gains public support among the nobility, who see Isla's rise as a threat to their carefully maintained social hierarchy. Worse, other Omegas from the choosing ceremony, influenced by their families, publicly denounce Isla. They call her an opportunist, a social climber who manipulated the Beast King through Omega pheromones and low cunning. The media picks up the story. Opinion pieces debate whether poor Omegas should be allowed in presentations at all. Someone starts a petition to repeal the Omega Protection Act. Isla reads the articles with growing dread. She's not naive. She knows Theon has enemies, knows that his power makes him a target. But she didn't realize how much venom people would direct at her specifically. "They hate me," she says one night, sitting in Theon's study while he reviews the Assembly's petition. "They hate what you represent," Theon corrects, his voice hard. "You're proof that their entire social structure is built on arbitrary nonsense. That Omega worth isn't determined by last names or bank accounts. They need you to fail because if you succeed, their whole worldview collapses." "Can they actually force you to release the claim?" she asks, fear creeping into her voice. Theon looks up, his silver eyes blazing. "They can try, but I've toppled kingdoms, Isla. A bunch of entitled nobles with fancy titles don't scare me." He stands, moving around the desk to kneel in front of her chair, taking her hands. "But I need you to understand something," he says seriously. "This is going to get worse before it gets better. They're going to attack your character, dig up every mistake you've ever made, twist every truth about your life into something ugly. I can protect you from physical harm, but the social assault is going to be brutal." Isla's hands tremble in his. "Maybe I should go. Release the claim voluntarily. You don't need this political nightmare." "Look at me," Theon commands gently. She meets his eyes. "I don't give a damn about the political nightmare," he says fiercely. "The only thing I care about is whether you want to stay. Not for my sake, not because you're afraid, but because you actually want this. Want us." And that's when Isla realizes the truth. She's fallen for him. Completely. Irrevocably. "I want to stay," she whispers. "I want us." Theon exhales like he's been holding his breath for weeks. Then he pulls her into his arms, and for the first time since the claiming, he scents her properly, nuzzling into her neck in a gesture that's both protective and possessive. "Then we fight," he murmurs against her skin. "Together. Midpoint. The decision that changes everything." The next morning, Theon calls a press conference. It's unprecedented. The Beast King doesn't do press conferences. He doesn't explain himself to anyone. But he stands before cameras and reporters with Isla at his side and makes a statement that rocks the kingdom. 300 years ago, he begins, his voice carrying absolute authority. I stopped believing in fate. I'd lived too long, seen too much, lost too many people I loved. I thought connection was something I'd never feel again. He looks at Isla, and his expression softens. Then I walked into that ceremony and saw an Omega standing alone, surrounded by people who had already decided she was worthless. But when I looked at her, I saw strength, intelligence, courage, everything I'd been searching for and given up hope of finding. He turns back to the cameras. The noble assembly wants to invalidate my claim because Isla doesn't come from money, because her father was a blacksmith instead of a baron, because she had to work for survival instead of being handed everything on a silver platter. His voice drops, becoming dangerous. Let me be clear. If the assembly succeeds in invalidating this claim, I will abdicate the throne. I will renounce my titles, dissolve my alliances, and let them find another king, because I will not rule a kingdom that values accident of birth over actual worth. The room erupts. Reporters shout questions. The statement trends within minutes. But Theon ignores all of it. He takes Isla's hand and leads her out of the press room, back to the safety of their private world. Later, in the garden, Isla confronts him. You can't actually abdicate, she says. Your kingdom needs you. My kingdom needs a ruler who believes in justice, Theon counters. If I cave to the assembly now, I'm admitting they're right. That some people matter less than others based on circumstances they can't control. I won't do that. Not even for the crown. Isla's heart swells with emotion so intense it hurts. You'd give up everything for me? I'd give up everything to be with someone who sees me as Theon, not the Beast King, he says simply. You do that. You always have. She kisses him then, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. It's their first kiss, gentle and sweet and perfect. When they break apart, Theon rests his forehead against hers. No matter what happens, he murmurs, you're not alone anymore. You belong with me. And you belong with me. She whispers back. Complications. The war on. Multiple fronts. The press conference doesn't solve their problems. It escalates them. The noble assembly doubles down, threatening to call a vote of no confidence in Theon's leadership. Several powerful dukes withdraw their military support, leaving border territories vulnerable. Public opinion splits sharply. Common citizens, especially lower-class Omegas, rally behind Isla. They see her as proof that they matter, that their lives have value. Protests erupt in major cities, with Omega rights, groups demanding an end to bloodline discrimination. But the nobility fights back hard. They fund counter-protests. They pressure businesses that express support for Isla. They threaten any noble family that dares to defend the Beast King's choice. It becomes a proxy war for the soul of the kingdom. In the midst of this chaos, someone tries to poison Isla. The attempt is clumsy, easily caught by Theon's security team. But the message is clear. There are people who want her dead. Theon's response is swift and terrifying. He identifies the 3 nobles behind the assassination attempt and has them arrested within hours. When the assembly protests, he releases evidence of their other crimes, financial corruption and abuse of power that's been hidden for years. The nobles are stripped of their titles and exiled. The assembly goes quiet, but Isla sees the cost. Theon's becoming more ruthless, more isolated, more like the Beast King of legend, the man who destroyed cities and showed no mercy. You're changing, she tells him one night. I'm protecting what's mine, he says flatly. I don't want you to become the monster they think you are, she says gently. Not for me. He stares at her for a long moment, and she sees the internal struggle play out across his face. The beast versus the man. Finally, he softens. You're right, he admits. I'm letting fear drive me. Fear of losing you. You won't lose me, she promises. But we have to find another way. A way that doesn't destroy who you are. And that's when Isla has an idea. Isla spends 3 days locked in the estate's legal library reading centuries of kingdom law. She's looking for precedent, for anything that might support their position legally rather than through force. And buried in a forgotten legal code from 200 years ago, she finds it. The Common Bond Act. It was passed during a period of radical reform, designed to prevent noble families from monopolizing Omega bloodlines. The law states that any Omega who successfully completes a trial of worth can claim legal equivalency with noble-born Omegas, regardless of birth status. The trial involves demonstrating skills valuable to the kingdom, education, diplomatic ability, or specialized knowledge that serves the public good. The law has never been used because no poor Omega has ever known it existed, but it's still legally binding. Isla brings the discovery to Theon with shaking hands. This could work, he says, reading through the statute, but the trial would be administered by the Assembly, the same people trying to invalidate our bond. Let them, Isla says firmly. Let them test me publicly. If I pass, they have no legal grounds to challenge the claim. And if I fail, she swallows hard. Then maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not worthy. That's bullshit, Theon growls. Your worth isn't determined by some arbitrary test. But this is how we win without you becoming the villain, she insists. We beat them using their own rules. We prove that their system is flawed by succeeding within it. Theon doesn't like it. Every protective instinct he has rebels against putting Isla in that position. But he also recognizes the wisdom in her strategy. If we do this, he says carefully, I can't help you during the trial. It has to be all you. Can you handle that? Isla thinks about every time she's been underestimated, dismissed, mocked. About every moment she's had to fight for scraps while others were handed kingdoms. Yes, she says, I can. All is lost. The trial that nearly breaks her. The trial of worth is scheduled for 2 weeks later, held in the Grand Assembly Hall with full media coverage. The format is brutal. 3 sections testing education, diplomatic skill, and practical knowledge. Each section is designed by Assembly members who have every incentive to make Isla fail. The education section requires her to read and translate ancient legal texts in multiple dead languages. It's designed to be impossible for someone without expensive classical training. But Isla spent years in public libraries teaching herself everything she was never formally taught. She translates the texts flawlessly, even catching deliberate errors the examiners planted. The diplomatic section requires her to negotiate a mock treaty between hostile territories, balancing competing interests while maintaining kingdom stability. Isla draws on her life experience, on years of navigating social systems designed to exclude her. She finds creative compromises that satisfy all parties, demonstrating strategic thinking that impresses even her harshest critics. But it's the final section that nearly destroys her. Practical knowledge. The Assembly demands she demonstrate a skill that serves the public good. Most noble Omegas showcase artistic talents, music, painting, classical dance, skills that demonstrate refinement and culture. Isla has none of those skills. She never had the money for lessons or the time for hobbies. She stands before the Assembly, mind racing, trying to figure out what she can possibly offer that they'll accept. And then she remembers her father. I'd like to demonstrate practical engineering, she announces. The Assembly members exchange confused glances. Omegas don't do engineering. It's common labor beneath their station. But the rules don't specify what practical skill must be demonstrated, just that it serves the public good. Isla requests basic materials, metal scraps, tools, a forge. Within 2 hours, working in front of cameras and a confused audience, she builds a small but efficient water filtration system. Contaminated water kills thousands of people in the lower districts every year, she explains as she works. This design costs almost nothing to produce and can be maintained by anyone with basic knowledge. It's not elegant, it's not refined, but it saves lives. She demonstrates the system, running dirty water through and producing clean drinking water on the other side. This is what I can offer, she says, meeting the Assembly's eyes. Not art or culture or refinement, just solutions to problems most of you have never had to think about because you've never been poor enough to face them. The silence in the hall is deafening. The Assembly deliberates for 3 hours. It's the longest deliberation in trial history. When they return, the head judge looks directly at Isla. The Assembly has reached a decision, he announces. By a vote of, 12-8, we find that Isla Thorne has successfully completed the trial of worth and is hereby granted legal equivalency with noble-born Omegas. The hall erupts, half in celebration, half in outrage. But it doesn't matter. Isla won. She beat their system. She proved her worth on her own terms. Theon is waiting when she exits the hall. He sweeps her into his arms, lifting her off her feet, and kisses her like she's the most precious thing in existence. You're incredible, he murmurs, against her lips. You're absolutely incredible. 1 month later, Theon proposes properly. Not in front of cameras or crowds, Just the two of them in the garden where they first kissed, under stars that have watched him live for centuries. "I want to bond with you," he says, kneeling before her. "Not because of claims or laws or political necessity, but because you're the first person in 300 years who's made me want to be human again." He produces a ring, simple silver engraved with old lichen runes. "This inscription says, 'You are seen,'" he explains, "because that's what you've always deserved. To be seen for who you are, not dismissed for what you lack." Isla's crying as she says yes. The bonding ceremony happens a week later, combining traditional Omega Alpha rituals with elements Isla chooses. It's held publicly, a deliberate statement that they have nothing to hide. The ceremony includes a traditional bite, where Theon marks her as his mate permanently. But unusually, Isla insists on a reciprocal mark, claiming him just as publicly as he claimed her. It's unconventional. Omegas don't traditionally mark alphas, but nothing about their relationship has been traditional. When Theon's teeth sink into her bonding gland, the connection snaps into place instantly. She feels his emotions, his fierce protectiveness, his overwhelming love, and when she marks him in return, she knows he feels hers. Determination, trust, and a love that chose him despite every reason not to. They're bonded, permanent, unbreakable. The Assembly can't challenge it now. The bond is sacred, legally and biologically. They've won. The immediate aftermath of the bonding is chaotic, but ultimately transformative. Several of the most conservative Assembly members resign in protest, but they're replaced by more progressive nobles who recognize that the kingdom is changing. The Omega Protection Act is not only maintained but strengthened, with new provisions ensuring all Omegas receive education and support regardless of economic status. Isla becomes an unlikely icon. She doesn't seek the spotlight, but her story inspires thousands of lower-class Omegas who finally see someone like them succeed. She establishes the Omega Education Foundation, using Theon's resources and her own growing influence to provide scholarships and practical training to Omegas from poor backgrounds. The water filtration design she demonstrated at the trial is mass-produced and distributed throughout the lower districts, saving countless lives. Theon, for his part, becomes a more engaged ruler. Having Isla by his side reminds him why he took the throne in the first place, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Together, they push through reforms that reduce wealth inequality, improve working conditions, and create social mobility that's never existed before. It's not a revolution, it's evolution. Slow, steady change that actually sticks. Not everyone is happy. Some nobles never accept Isla. Some Omega families still look down on her common birth, but the bond between her and Theon only grows stronger. At night, when they're alone in their quarters, he tells her about the centuries before her, about the loneliness that defined his existence, about how he'd given up hope of ever feeling connected to anyone again. "You gave me a reason to be human," he tells her, running his fingers through her hair as they lie tangled together. "You gave me purpose beyond just surviving. You gave me belonging," she whispers back. "You saw me when everyone else looked through me." It's not a fairy tale. They still face challenges, political opposition, social prejudice, the occasional assassination threat from extremists who hate what their union represents. But they face it together, and that makes all the difference. 5 years after the choosing ceremony that changed everything, Isla stands in the new Omega Rights Center, watching young Omegas from the lower districts participate in educational workshops. She's 27 now, confident and poised in ways she never imagined possible. She sits on the King's Council as Director of Social Services, a position Theon created specifically for her. Her voice shapes policy. Her experience informs reform. The girl who once scrubbed floors to survive now helps determine the kingdom's future. Theon joins her at the window, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. The bond hums contentedly between them, a constant warm presence in the back of her mind. "Thinking about that night?" he asks softly. She knows exactly which night he means. The choosing ceremony. The moment everything changed. "Sometimes," she admits, "I think about how terrified I was. How certain I was that I didn't belong in that room with all those perfect Omegas in their perfect dresses with their perfect families. And now?" he prompts. She turns in his arms, meeting those silver eyes that still make her heart race. "Now I know I never needed to belong to their world," she says. "I needed to find someone who would build a new world with me." Theon kisses her, slow and deep and full of promise. "Best decision I ever made," he murmurs against her lips. walking into that hall and claiming the poor Omega everyone else dismissed. Best decision I ever made, she counters, was believing I deserved to be claimed. They stand there together, watching the next generation of Omegas learn that their worth isn't determined by birth or wealth or social status, that they're valuable simply because they exist, that they deserve to be seen. The mocked Omega and the Beast King built more than a life together. They built a legacy that will outlast even immortality. Sometimes the worst moments of your life are actually doorways, invitations to step into the person you were always meant to become. All you have to do is have the courage to walk through. Loved this epic Omega romance? Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a story about finding your fated mate against impossible odds. Drop a comment with the word Omega if you want part 2, where we explore the challenges of bonding with an immortal alpha and the price of true mate bonds. Your support keeps these stories coming. Until next time, believe in love that sees you for who you truly are.